Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. I'm pleased to welcome back Dr. Jack Mintz to Boom and Bust. He is the President's Fellow at the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy and a prolific economic analyst. Welcome back, Jack.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Tony.
A pleasure to have you. And I guess my first question is something that you wrote recently about how Canada is not as tax competitive as the Prime Minister is suggesting. What did you mean by that?
Well, actually, it goes to the heart of work that's been done by the Department of Finance, and I have to be I was the one that started it with them, going back almost 50 years ago, in which we developed a way of trying to model how taxes influence investment and take into account all the features of the tax system. But to make the story short, the trouble with the Department of Finance calculations is that they tend to be biased downwards for Canada relative to, let's say, United States. And there's several reasons for that. For example, the finance industry is not included. And of course, we have a higher corporate income tax rate on financial firms compared to other firms. It's 29% instead of 26%. Also, they don't include the resource firms like oil and gas and mining, which I do actually in our work. Um, and also, property taxes are excluded, partly for measurement problems. Although lately I've looked at some recent data coming out of the United States and Canada, and we're a little bit higher on property taxes compared to the United States. And finally, the most important item is there's no inclusion of carbon taxation, which raises the cost of energy and raises the cost of production. And so when you start putting it all together, we're actually misinforming the public about how tax competitive Canada is. And I have to admit, there's just some more work that needs to be done to really fully understand whether we are sufficiently tax competitive or not.
Mm. So this sounds pretty egregious to me, Jack. And is this a Statistics Canada problem, or is it just government policy? What's going on here?
Well, it's partly a data issue, but it is partly related to the lack of information that we collect. For example, Statistics Canada could ask companies to identify how much property taxes they pay and segregate it from, let's say, the cost of production that they report. That is not a difficult thing to do, in my view, but it's never been done. In fact, I've even raised it with Statistics Canada in the past so that we could do that. The finance side is a little difficult, mainly for data, but I think that's fixable. In fact, there is some work I once did where we did include finance in the best way possible, and I think it can be done. And certainly the resource firms can be included. And as far as carbon taxation, that is a no-brainer almost. In fact, there's some work that I have done recently where we have included carbon taxes, at least for oil and gas and power companies. And what we've shown actually is that without carbon taxation, Canada's relatively tax competitive with the U.S. Let's say between Texas and Alberta, partly because Alberta has a low corporate income tax rate. Uh, but um, but actually, when it comes to once you include the carbon tax, actually we're no longer competitive in terms of a cost basis in terms of producing products. So that's actually I think that's a very important conclusion, and I do think that we need to I think have a much better analysis than we're currently doing.
How does the last year's budget, federal budget, affect our tax competitiveness on top of all of this?
Well, the federal government did bring in this productivity write-off for buildings used by the manufacturing industry, and that drives down the effective tax rate for manufacturing. But it's only for that sector. And there was also some changes for computers as well. So that does bring down the effective tax rates to some degree. But the problem is it's only with respect to a limited number of sectors in the economy and doesn't apply to everyone. And so, for example, in our numbers, oil and gas is more heavily taxed in Canada compared to the US. And And so therefore, the productivity incentive doesn't help the oil and gas sector, as an example.
Interesting. Jack, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be back with you after these important messages. Stay with us.